On May 23, 2019, during the early summer when the weather was starting to warm up, a woman was walking home after her shift in Shinjuku, Tokyo, Japan. It was 4 a.m. When she arrived at the main entrance of her apartment building in Higashi Shinjuku and used her key card to enter the lobby, she was completely shocked by the sight before her. On the cold lobby floor, a woman was sitting silently. At first, she thought it was a ghost. The woman was wearing an oversized men's t-shirt, much larger than her body. She was wearing only underwear below, no shoes, and was covered in blood. Clearly, this wasn't the woman's own blood. She was sitting with her legs stretched out, smoking a cigarette while talking on the phone. Her right hand held the phone, while her left hand held the cigarette. And right in front of her, a young man was lying in a pool of blood, breathing with difficulty, dying. The resident who witnessed this scene tried to stay calm and called the police. Shortly after, police and ambulance arrived, and other residents in the building came out to see what was happening in the middle of the night. The woman was arrested at the scene. The man, who was nearly unconscious, was taken to the hospital. The resident had taken photos of the scene and immediately posted them online with the caption, "I just witnessed this. This woman is insane." Before the news could reach the media, the images had already spread across social media. The victim was a 20-year-old man named Ryuzaki, who worked as a host at a bar in Kabukicho, Shinjuku. Let's delve deeper into what a host's job entails. Typically, when a female customer visits for the first time, they pay around $200 to $500 per hour, not including drinks, just for the company. Hosts take turns sitting with the customer. The customer has brief conversations with each host, carefully observes their faces, and then chooses the one they like. The chosen host stays and tries their best to understand what type of person the customer is. Whether they're shy, have low self-esteem, rarely interact with men, or conversely, if they're very interested in men. Ryuzaki wasn't the number one host, but ranked fourth, with a steady clientele. He was born in 1999 in Nasukarasuyama, Tochigi Prefecture, Japan. Ryuzaki came from a poor family with 6 siblings. His parents couldn't properly care for all their children. Eventually, when Ryuzaki was still in elementary school, his parents divorced and the 6 siblings were separated, sent to different orphanages. After that, they lost contact and knew nothing about each other's whereabouts. As a teenager, Ryuzaki despised the orphanage. At school, classmates mocked him for being an orphan. The conditions at the orphanage were poor, teachers treated the children badly, and the other kids who were supposed to be his friends engaged in bad behavior like stealing and fighting. Finally, right after finishing middle school, Ryuzaki left the orphanage. Instead of going to high school, he became homeless, working as a construction laborer when work was available, living day to day. He usually slept in 24-hour internet cafes or manga cafes, but only when he had money. When he didn't, he slept on the streets. One day, while lying on cardboard boxes, a man approached Ryuzaki. He handed him $100 and said, "Instead of begging in this cold, why don't you come work at my club? I'll pay you and provide accommodation." This man was a senior manager at Club Fusion, a host club in Kabukicho, Shinjuku. In his circumstances, Ryuzaki had no other choice. He became a host under the nickname Luna. He was extremely satisfied with this job. Although he was new to Tokyo and the profession, so wasn't earning much yet, Club Fusion kept their promise, providing dormitory accommodation and salary, taking care of his food and lodging. The dormitory was an apartment he shared with his co-workers, and for the first time in his life, Ryuzaki had his own room. It was also the first time he'd ever had his hair cut at a salon. He had never been to one before. For Ryuzaki, this was a completely new world. The manager treated him well, taught him the job, gave him pocket money, and took him to the hospital when he was sick. On days off, the group would sit in the dormitory enjoying hot pot and beer together. It wasn't that he lacked humanity, but he had grown up without receiving much love. Now, he was happy living with his co-workers in the dormitory. He finally understood what happiness felt like, what it meant to live like a normal person. Gradually, Ryuzaki's personality changed. Initially, he was very shy, quiet, and socially awkward. But after a few months of work, when he started joking and chatting cheerfully with customers, his regular clientele grew. As this happened, Ryuzaki's self-esteem improved. Soon after, Ryuzaki's name appeared on Club Fusion's billboard, as I mentioned earlier about the ranking from 1 to 4. This was a competition, arranged by the club to show who was number 1 and who was rising in the ranks. Ryuzaki had achieved 4th place. For someone who had been homeless, this was a tremendous success. He had come to Tokyo and become a host whose name was on the billboard. In early 2019, Ryuzaki went with his colleagues to a hostess bar. I've heard that hosts and hostesses often become each other's customers. They relieve stress by visiting each other's establishments after work. Hosts go to hostess bars to unwind with women, and hostesses go to host clubs to unwind with men. The place Ryuzaki visited was a girls' bar, different from traditional hostess bars. In traditional hostess bars, the interior is luxurious, with hostesses wearing suits sitting formally in front of customers, pouring drinks. Rather than entertainment, they mainly focus on conversation or supporting customers, typically businessmen who come for client entertainment. While there are many varieties, the girls' bar Ryuzaki visited was different. Here, female staff didn't sit with customers. They only served drinks, exchanged brief greetings, and if familiar, had short conversations. Since they didn't sit together, there was no physical contact. The atmosphere was very casual, and many young customers frequented the place. Here, Ryuzaki met Yuka Takaoka, a 21-year-old hostess who served him. Yuka was the deputy manager of the girls' bar and a very busy employee with many regular customers. She must have been earning well, but Yuka fell completely in love with Ryuzaki, initially because his appearance matched her type, and when they talked, she found him very comfortable and easygoing. Although Ryuzaki worked nights at the host bar, he wasn't a heavy drinker. Yuka noticed this immediately and said, "You don't need to drink at my table, just sitting here is enough." She was very considerate of him. Typically, a hostess like Yuka would need to get customers to drink a lot, especially expensive drinks, to make money. They often deliberately pour more drinks and drink along to increase sales. Some hostesses even use tricks like pouring iced tea that looks like whiskey into their own glasses to pretend they're drinking along. The customer pays for whiskey while the hostess drinks tea. Although Yuka had used such tricks to make money before, it was different with Ryuzaki. She didn't see him as a customer, but as a man. Don't drink. Ryuzaki also felt special because Yuka genuinely cared about him. They exchanged phone numbers, and Yuka promised to visit his host club. Initially, they didn't meet right away. They didn't contact or see each other for about a month or two. In March 2019, Yuka visited the host club where Ryuzaki worked. When they sat talking at the bar, they felt very compatible, conversation flowing naturally. To Ryuzaki, Yuka was just a customer, but Yuka had completely fallen for him. Afterward, she frequently visited, about 2 to 3 times a week after her shift. Yuka was serious. She thought, "Ryuzaki is currently ranked 4th, but that's okay. I'll help you rise in rank, don't worry." Yuka started ordering champagne and expensive whiskey, sometimes spending over $10,000 in a single day. Ryuzaki thought, "The champagne is nice. She's really a good customer who cares about me. She spends a lot on me because I do my job well." Since Yuka wasn't an ordinary person but a hostess, he thought this was simply a business relationship between industry professionals, not romantic feelings or love. Yuka was born in 1998, 1 year older than Ryuzaki. She was born in China, half Japanese Chinese, and moved to Japan when she was 2. She studied early childhood education in college but apparently didn't find it suitable and dropped out to attend some kind of academy. Yuka had an outgoing personality, was good at communication, and had many friends, but she also had mood swings and a hot temper. For example, once when someone spoke ill of her boyfriend, Yuka became angry and threw a chair. She had underlying violent tendencies. How did Yuka start working at the hostess bar? A teacher at her academy also ran a hostess bar. It's unclear what kind of academy it was, but the teacher invited her, "Why don't you try working at my bar? It's nothing bad, just serving tables." That was this girl's bar. On the surface, Yuka appeared innocent, but when speaking, she was hot-tempered and irritable. However, this attracted male customers. They liked her slightly difficult personality that occasionally showed cuteness. Yuka gradually gained many regular customers and was promoted to deputy manager of the girls' bar. She earned quite well. Although young, she was decisive and often stepped in to resolve situations with troublesome customers or inappropriate behavior. She could handle situations through persuasion or firmness when necessary. Even senior hostesses didn't dare look down on Yuka. Additionally, Yuka had an open-minded personality, and in such a highly competitive industry, she was still willing to help colleagues when they faced difficulties, sharing her secrets to success. Almost no one disliked Yuka. But Yuka's life changed when she met Ryuzaki, the host she shouldn't have fallen in love with. Yuka became completely obsessed with Ryuzaki to the point of losing control. Even while working, she constantly thought about him, texted him, and if she didn't receive a response, she would become obsessive. If she couldn't contact him, she would personally go to his workplace. Each time she visited, she would spend around $5,000 to $6,000. Yuka couldn't stand seeing Ryuzaki sitting with other customers. She became intensely jealous. What could she do? To prevent other customers from coming, she had to monopolize Ryuzaki. That meant visiting more frequently and spending more money. Yuka deceived herself into thinking that although she was currently coming as a customer, Ryuzaki would see her as a woman. But that wasn't the case. To Ryuzaki, Yuka was still just a customer. She believed that if they kept meeting like this, they would eventually become a real couple in love. Yuka spent money on Ryuzaki almost daily. In just 2 months, Ryuzaki rose from 4th place to 3rd, then 2nd, and finally 1st. The rankings had changed. However, Yuka wasn't wealthy. She was just a working person, but she spent everything she earned on Ryuzaki. Yuka's wallet was getting thinner. Although she earned well from the girls' bar, after spending all her savings, her income from work wasn't enough to maintain Ryuzaki's #1 position. So, Yuka began working as a delivery health service provider in Shibuya, which was essentially an escort service. Initially, when working at the girls' bar, Yuka strongly disliked escort work. These services had hourly base rates and, like host clubs, had additional fees for requesting specific providers, as customers often wanted to choose popular ones. Yuka didn't want to do this kind of work. She thought her girls' bar was different, that she would never do escort work. But what choice did she have? She needed money to see Ryuzaki, to keep his #1 position. Her ultimate goal was that someday she wouldn't need to pay anymore, and they would become real lovers. That was Yuka's only life goal at this point, so she entered the escort business, keeping it secret from Ryuzaki. To him, she said, "I'm the deputy manager of a girls' bar. I can spend this much money. I'll take care of you." She boasted while secretly working as an escort. Yuka's infatuation with Ryuzaki was partly Ryuzaki's fault too. He would say things like, "I love you," and "if we get married," which fueled Yuka's delusions, but she shouldn't have believed these words. Being a hostess herself, she should have understood not to trust words from someone in the industry. However, Ryuzaki gradually began to open his heart. Although he was receiving money, he enjoyed being with Yuka. Because she loved him so much, he thought perhaps dating her seriously wouldn't be bad. He started developing feelings for her. In April 2019, after about 2 months of meeting as host and customer, they spent a night together. This made Ryuzaki feel even more affection for Yuka, but the problem was that this wasn't just simple love, it had turned into an obsession. Yuka constantly texted asking, "Where are you?" and "Why aren't you answering my messages?" She demanded Ryuzaki quit his host job. When he said, "I'm with a customer, talk later," she would reply, "Come out now, let the customer go, let's go on a date, I'll pay you." Ryuzaki, now the #1 host, was very busy. When he told Yuka, "My schedule is full today, let's meet tomorrow," she would become hysterical and threaten to do something reckless. Ryuzaki began to fear her, because she seemed capable of actually doing it. Although Ryuzaki didn't love Yuka, after spending time together, he did care about her. He was genuinely worried about her. In fact, if he had just wanted to take advantage of her, he could have abandoned her after getting all that money. But he still cared for Yuka, sometimes even refusing payment when providing dating services. However, this only made Yuka's obsession grow stronger. She demanded Ryuzaki skip weekend work to spend time with her. But this was his job. He couldn't not work. The more he worked, the more Yuka demanded he quit. Finally, everything exploded on May 20th, 2019. Yuka received a call from a friend saying she saw Ryuzaki entering a motel with another woman. In a rage, Yuka waited for Ryuzaki after his shift. "Why did you go to the motel?" "Well, yes, I went, but nothing happened." Yuka burst out like a flood. "Quit being a host right now." "I don't care how much you make. I'll give you that money. I'll rent you an apartment and pay your salary." Ryuzaki refused. "No, the owner saved me when I was homeless. I can't betray him, and I like living in the dormitory with everyone." Yuka had to accept it angrily. "Then when you meet other women, you must report to me, understand?" Ryuzaki reluctantly agreed to calm her down, but felt it was unfair. "She knows I'm a host. She works at a girls' bar herself. Why is she demanding this from me?" It's unclear exactly what they agreed upon that day, but Ryuzaki began reporting to Yuka about every customer he met. However, Yuka was still unsatisfied. If Ryuzaki didn't answer his phone for a while, or was slow to reply to messages, she would frantically call 10 to 20 times until he answered. "Please stop this. I'll rent an apartment for you. We can live together." One day, Yuka went to a real estate agency. "Show me the most expensive and luxurious apartment in this area." The agent looked skeptically at the 21-year-old girl. "How can such a young girl have so much money? Are your parents wealthy?" When they viewed the apartments, Yuka fell in love with one. "I'll sign the contract for this one. When can I move in?" The agent was concerned. "Will you live alone? Or with family?" The real question being, who will pay for this? Yuka replied, "No, I'll live with my boyfriend. He'll quit his job and move in with me." The agent recalled that Yuka's expression was like that of a new bride looking for a marital home, full of hope. After signing the contract, Yuka went to Ryuzaki. "Honey, I just rented a beautiful apartment. From now on, we'll live there. Quit your job and move in." Ryuzaki thought, "Are we really serious enough to live together?" Whenever Yuka showed her obsession, Ryuzaki would shudder. However, perhaps their relationship was ambiguous at that time. Ryuzaki frequently visited the apartment but didn't move in. He just occasionally stopped by, never bringing his belongings. Even this made Yuka constantly ask, "When will you move in? When will you quit your job?" Although unplanned, she frequently visited. Yuka's life had completely revolved around Ryuzaki. This was especially evident in her diary, which contained entries like, "The only way to end the pain in this relationship is to kill Ryuzaki." At the end of May 2019, Yuka contacted Ryuzaki saying she would clean the apartment and asked for his help. That afternoon, after cleaning together, Ryuzaki took a bath. He fell asleep in the bathtub. A while later, he woke up, went out, and fell asleep on Yuka's bed, wearing only his underwear. At this point, Yuka secretly took Ryuzaki's phone and looked through it. Inside were many photos taken at the host club with other female customers. Yuka couldn't bear it anymore. "If I can't have you, then you must die." At 3:50 a.m., Yuka took a knife from the kitchen and approached the bed where Ryuzaki was sleeping unaware. She stood looking down at him for a moment, then raised the knife high and used all her strength to stab Ryuzaki in the stomach. The knife went in up to its handle. Ryuzaki was completely defenseless, being attacked while asleep. He jolted awake, gasping for breath, blood already pouring from the wound. Instinctively, he tried to push Yuka away, but she had climbed on top of his stomach, not moving. Finally, while choking and pinning Ryuzaki down, Yuka asked, "Do you love me?" In this situation, Ryuzaki knew what he had to do. He had to say he loved her and promise to be with her forever. But Yuka responded, "Then we must die together." At this point, Ryuzaki was in so much pain, his entire body was shaking. Yuka suddenly yanked the knife out of his stomach. This caused even more blood to pour out. Ryuzaki begged, "Please call an ambulance." Yuka just stood silently, showing no emotion, watching Ryuzaki writhing in pain. Fortunately, Ryuzaki still had enough strength to move. He clutched his stomach wound and tried to make it to the door. From behind, Yuka screamed, "Don't go! Don't go!" But Ryuzaki knew he had to escape at any cost. He dragged himself to the elevator while still bleeding. Ryuzaki managed to get down to the lobby by elevator. There was a security camera in the elevator that recorded Ryuzaki's descent. Although this footage wasn't released to the public, it was described as being like a horror movie scene. All the buttons, walls, and floor of the elevator were covered in blood. Ryuzaki was wearing only blood-soaked underwear. He no longer looked human, but like a zombie, his entire body red with blood, trying to crawl out of the elevator into the lobby. It was truly like a movie scene. He couldn't make it outside and collapsed on the lobby floor. Yuka had followed him down, bringing her phone, glasses, and cigarettes. She calmly sat down next to the dying Ryuzaki, lit a cigarette, and called her friend. Ryuzaki was lying dying right behind her. This scene caused significant criticism of the police. In the US, police would have immediately drawn their weapons and shouted, "Hands up! Get down!" But 3 police officers arrived and waited until Yuka finished her phone call. This scene was captured. Yuka was talking on the phone while the police sat down at eye level with her in a friendly manner. Whether it was how the photo was taken or not, there was clearly no sign of forceful restraint. The Japanese public heavily criticized this. Is it because she's a woman, because she's pretty, that she's being treated so gently? The police explained they approached carefully because they didn't know what Yuka might do. They wanted to avoid provoking her and tried to resolve it through dialogue. However, they still received much criticism. When these photos spread online, they caused an uproar. Most people were outraged. How can she smoke and talk on the phone while having just tried to kill someone? She's clearly psychotic. But some disturbed individuals actually idolized Yuka. "Kawaii, this is a true yandere. I want to be stabbed too." Yuka was arrested at the scene without any resistance. She even smiled in the police car. When police asked why she killed Ryuzaki, she replied, "Because I loved him too much. I had to kill him. I wanted to be with him. There was no other choice." Meanwhile, Ryuzaki underwent emergency surgery at the hospital. When he arrived, his survival chance was only about 20%. The knife had pierced his liver, making the surgery extremely difficult. The doctors had almost given up, but completed the operation. After 51 hours in a coma, he miraculously regained consciousness. No one thought he would survive after losing so much blood. Fortunately, he lived. However, he had to stay in the hospital for over a month. Initially, he lost his voice and couldn't speak at all. He could only lie in bed, and when he finally could sit up, he needed physical therapy. But worse than the physical pain was the psychological trauma. While lying in his hospital bed, he constantly had hallucinations of Yuka crawling on his hospital room window. These hallucinations kept recurring. Finally, he said, "I don't need a window. I don't need to see sunlight. Please move me to a room without windows." Frightening, isn't it? The trial began on December 3rd of the same year. Surprisingly, Ryuzaki was present in court, sitting there with a gentle smile. This wasn't a mocking or sarcastic smile, but a genuine one. He smiled when looking at Yuka. When reporters asked why he was smiling, he replied, "I have forgiven Yuka." Before the trial, Yuka had sent him a long letter. The content was, "You must have been in so much pain, gone through so much suffering and despair. I'm sorry. I should have disappeared long ago." After reading the letter, Ryuzaki thought for a while and sent a petition to the court. "I don't want a harsh sentence. I hope Yuka will have a normal life." Some people thought he forgave her because he feared retaliation, but the forgiveness seemed genuine. After considering various factors, the court sentenced her to 3 years and 6 months for attempted murder. The public reacted strongly to this. They felt the sentence was too light, and that such a dangerous woman didn't deserve to be released back into society. This story gives us a thought-provoking glimpse into Japan's host-hostess culture, where the line between service and genuine feelings becomes blurred. It also reflects the dark side of society, where young people like Ryuzaki, once homeless, and Yuka, an ordinary young woman, get drawn into a complex world of money, illusions, and distorted emotions. It shows how the Japanese society reacted to the crime, from those who romanticized violence through the concept of yandere to the police's approach and what many considered a lenient sentence. This might reflect deeper issues in how society views violence and psychological problems. There's an ironic ending as both main characters continued their lives in the entertainment industry, Ryuzaki as a more famous host and Yuka as a social media influencer. Perhaps this also reflects modern society, where tragedy sometimes transforms into entertainment and mass consumption. This isn't just a story about obsessive love, but a complex portrait of contemporary social issues. Loneliness, delusion, economic pressure, and the blurred lines between reality and fantasy in the digital age. That's the case for today. What are your thoughts about this incident? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.